Life is good, but it can be better.
The Nintendo Switch has enjoyed a great deal of success during the ninth generation, from first-party bangers to first-party collaborations with their close partners, and even some third-party releases to round out the entire library. With the Switch 2 on the horizon and the confirmation of backward compatibility for the vast majority of the Switch's library, the potential is here for many games to see improvements across the board, which encourage us to revisit games we've played and even give others a first try if its current performance isn't up to your liking. Today, I'd like to talk about a handful of these Switch games that will be amazing to see performance boosts, whether it be frame rate, handheld and docked resolution, or both. What up? It's your boy Geronimo, and we are back for another video. Thank you for tuning in, and if this is your first time here to the channel, feel free to give a like on the video and subscribe for more gaming content, news, discussions, and more. The first game I'd like to talk about is probably the elephant in the room as far as current Switch exclusives that could use a bit of a performance boost on the Switch 2, and that is Bayonetta 3. So I actually love this game, and as far as a start-to-finish story playthrough, it's probably my favorite of the three. I know, not a popular opinion, but I think more people will appreciate this game on Switch 2 hardware if it can get the boost in resolution, both handheld and docked, in addition to the frame rate being locked at 60 frames per second instead of it flying all over the place as it does on the current Switch. The game is actually pretty intensive compared to the first two, especially where the first Bayonetta 1 and 2 were targeting hardware akin to Xbox 360, PS3, and I'll throw Wii U in there, even though that system has some advancements over the previous two. This game is definitely more expansive. You go to different worlds, you have a lot of different theming there. You have the Demon Slave mechanic, which pretty much summons one of Bayonetta's umbral demons, and you can just control them on the field against other larger enemies. So it's definitely more involved and kind of kaiju-esque as far as the battles can go. I'm not saying you're forced to use them, but you know, it's there and it is an integral new mechanic for the game. But with this, especially noticeable in docked mode, it can really hammer the resolution. It can drop it. You can see it kind of drop for a moment. Even some areas you go to in opening sequences, just in the distance, that resolution, while it does seem impressive, especially on the little hybrid powerhouse that could, it doesn't show quite as nicely as some other games in the system. So I do think, despite some narrative choices that kind of split the fan base in two as far as their reception of it, I think more people will give this an honest try as both a game itself and really enjoy what it's here to offer if it can get the resolution at a much higher place and that frame rate, at least to how Bayonetta 2 on the Switch is, which is mostly 60 frames with some dips in the 50s. I think that would be ideal for Bayonetta 3, and I think it would really round out the entire main trilogy on its own. The next game I'd like to talk about is actually one of two from the same developer, though they're two completely different projects and different IPs. One owned by Nintendo, one that's licensed. But for the first one, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Now this came out in the fall of 2020. I think it was slotted as their holiday game at the time, or at least one of them. And this game is essentially a what-if prequel to Breath of the Wild in regards to that war between the Kingdom of Hyrule, Calamity Ganon, and of course all the champions we know and love from Breath of the Wild, including Link and Zelda, fighting them off and how that outcome goes. It's not exactly what you think. But as far as the gameplay goes, it is similar to Hyrule Warriors that came out on the Wii U and then later got an enhanced release on 3DS regarding more content and characters, and a fully rounded out complete package on the Switch and within its first year or so. The thing though with this release is, while it is pretty impressive where it takes essentially the vast majority of Breath of the Wild assets, puts a spin on it in a more Dynasty Warriors or Muso, I believe it's pronounced, that type of gameplay style, it can really hammer down on the performance. So this game is meant to target 30 frames per second, but I'll keep it a buck with you all. It does not hold that at all. Very rarely does it hold 30 frames for more than 5-10 seconds. It's really more of a 20 something frame per second game. and with a lot of action going on screen, multiple characters to switch between, it just gets to be a bit much. And this is done by Koei Tecmo, of course. You know, they're known for their Dynasty Warrior games. But it's interesting, though, because the resolution, docked and handheld, I believe it's more so just over 720p docked and 540p handheld. However, both the user interface of docked and handheld, they target the native resolution. So the UI is 1080p docked and the resolution handheld is 720p. So I think with the Switch version itself, if they want to do it that way, since it seems to be kind of a dynamic resolution, perhaps they can have it to where it gets boosted up all the way to 1080p, and it can at least be a locked 30 frames, especially since this game offers a 2-player co-op mode with any of the characters, which doesn't do it any favors in the performance department either. It's interesting though. I think this could really benefit from that tremendously. I doubt they'll get it to 60 frames because that would likely need an actual patch for the Switch 2 if they want to do a Switch 2 version, but we don't really see that very often with Koei Tecmo games. If there are any like that though, let me know in the comments and, you know, correct me so I can be schooled on it for sure. The second game that I'd like to talk about of this pairing is Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3: The Black Order, which came out, I want to say, in 2019. A very busy year, probably one of the Switch's best years, but it was a surprise return of the Marvel Ultimate Alliance series, which originally was done by Activision. I cannot remember the developer at the moment in time, unfortunately. I might edit in the video, you'll see it here. But those were originally on the 360 and PS3 themselves. But yeah, this game, lots of fun. I think it's kind of slept on at this point in time, especially as that was kind of like the end of the, you know, the MCU Infinity timeline or Infinity Saga. So it has a lot of characters familiar, like Guardians of the Galaxy, our core Avengers players, Defenders characters like Daredevil and Luke Cage and Iron Fist, some mutants, 3 Spider people, of course, Peter Parker, Miles Morales, and Gwen Stacy as Spider-Gwen, and so on and so forth. So it has a great roster, lots of different places you go to, really cool, somewhat comic accurate takes on characters and design, so it kind of stands out as far as other Marvel media out today. But as we know, since it is also a Koei Tecmo developed game, it's all action and it's very hectic as well, where I believe it does aim for a full 1080p and is dynamic, and it's similar to handheld where it goes for the dynamic 720p, and it targets 30 frames as well. Though it does drastically change, especially during bosses where there's a lot of action and particle effects and all sorts of things flying across the screen. It can get pretty busy, so it doesn't really hold the 30 frames either. It's more so, it's not as egregious as Age of Calamity, I would say, whereas when you're playing normally, it does kind of stick close to that 30 frame per second, but getting it locked at 30 frames at least would be very nice. And it can also help, you know, us to come together and play it locally, because it does support 4-player co-op, both local and online, I should say. But yeah, that game would be great to have, you know, boosted up to 1080p 30 at the very least. Again, don't really see a 60 frame per second mode for this one unless Koei Tecmo and Nintendo both come out and, you know, approve a patch for the Switch 2 to get it up to that 60 frame target. Which, I mean, would be pretty nice, honestly. But I doubt it. It's an older game at this point, and it's probably hard to really get physically as well. But that would be awesome to see, and I would actually go back and finish the DLC, because I never did all the DLC personally. It can get tedious, but overall it's a great game, and I would like to see it come back in that way. The next games I would definitely want to see get some improvements on backward compatibility on the Switch 2 are, well, I mean, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I don't want to lump both of them because they kind of are two halves of the same major experience of wanderlust, exploration, physics, sandboxy gameplay, especially with Tears of the Kingdom. Now, it might be odd to pair them up like this, and I'm sure someone will be like, come on, Drama, we don't need to do that. Breath of the Wild is essentially a Wii U game. While true, and Tears of the Kingdom nearly tripling in size as far as its world and how that game does manage to run in with all the physics calculations going on in the background, the game can definitely drop below 30 frames at times. And while both games do target 900p dot, which I believe the Tears of the Kingdom, I think they have some FSR, which is AMD's upscaling technology. I think it can appear up to 1080p upscale, but let's just say it's a 900p game. I think both of these games, Nintendo might take the care to give Switch 2 patches. And I say that to say, I think they will attempt to get both of these games, especially Breath of the Wild, since it's been a bit longer time. It's been like, what, 8 years? Over 8 years now? Crazy how that's flown by. But I can see them definitely giving these a Switch 2 patch, so the frame rate can be doubled to 60 frames. I'm not sure about resolution though. Maybe they can get these to 4K, since Switch 2 will be a 4K capable device. However, I would not be surprised if Nintendo opts for maybe a 1440p resolution or 2K, just so it can have a better time hitting 60 frames per second. I would not be surprised if they make this decision. But if it is 4K 60, that would be great as well. And it always looks good when the media likes to spin all this information around. But yeah. I would love to see that happen. If the 60 frames per second doesn't happen though, and it is just the same games but with backward compatibility on Switch 2, I can see the resolution staying up to that 900p 1080p and still looking pretty crisp. Lock 30 frames will be good, because I noticed, especially in Tears of the Kingdom, especially when you're going through some of the temples, especially one of the ones in the depths, meaning the Fire Temple. Once you're there and you're climbing through and going through all the puzzles, I noticed the game was pretty much running at like 20 something frames like most of the time. And when you would activate your Ultra Hand, which, you know, you'd use that to move everything around and activate different aspects of the environment, I noticed it kind of sticking to that lower 20 frames as well. And it didn't really bother me so much, but it was more of a surprise, like, oh wow, they actually have it running like this. And granted, it doesn't do that everywhere through the game, whether you're on Hyrule's lands, the depths, or high up in the sky. It just varies, and you can definitely push the game as far as, you know, different physics related activities you do, and even, you know, plunging from the skies itself all the way down underground to the depths, which is something I like to do in my free time, honestly. It's just fun to do, because there's barely any loading screen. But I digress. These two will really be awesome, and as two of some of the current Switch's most popular games, especially for Breath of the Wild. I think it would really turn some heads, especially for those that haven't really touched these games on an emulator to get these type of effects. It would be really awesome to see, and can, you know, tide us until the next major 3D Zelda game is coming out for the Switch 2. Now, this next game may be a little surprising due to, I don't think many people really talk about this receiving this, especially as it's gotten ports to other platforms after its original release, but the originally console exclusive Monster Hunter Rise, and of course, the Sunbreak expansion. So, I did originally play Monster Hunter Rise on the Switch back when it came out, and I really loved it. And to this day, both portably and docked, yes, docked as well, I still think it's one of the best looking games made for the Switch hardware in mind, which is awesome. It shows how RE Engine can really scale that low as far as what they're trying to achieve with their vision, but also it shows that they can scale up very well to higher spec machines and even PC, which is what we saw as the time's gone on. They got a PC port, I think a year after release, and it even got a surprise cross-platform PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and Xbox One up to Xbox Series X and S release, which is pretty cool to see. And all those versions definitely have their own target resolutions and frame rates, with other options to prioritize. Frame rate, prioritize resolution, or for the PS5 and Xbox Series X current gen consoles, can even prioritize even higher performance, up to 120 frames. Now the Switch version, I believe, Switch version in docked mode runs at about 756p. It's a very odd resolution, but it's just slightly over 720p. And in handheld, it runs at about 540p. Now, those resolutions may seem low and kind of spook some of you guys if you did not know about it, but the image quality holds up very well. And it has their own type of methods to keep it clean throughout the entirety of the hunt. I really did not see the resolution dip that much. In my experience, I don't really recall it doing that. And but they both also targeted 30 frames per second. And it held to 30 frames the vast majority of the time as well. I think maybe the most extreme time it would drop down to maybe mid 20, if it does get down there, is when you're fighting some more monsters like Magnamalo that jump around a lot, does a big dive bomb move that can catch you off guard. But honestly, I would think this is a good candidate to get a Switch 2 boost from backward compatibility or even a patch itself, because what is the handheld Monster Hunter team working on? I'm sure they're working on the next, I'm sure they struck up another deal with Nintendo to release their next, Monster Hunter follow-up to Rise, since the follow-up to Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Wild, is already out on current gen PS5 and my Xbox Series consoles. But I highly doubt they're going to get those scrunched down to the Switch 2 spec. Not saying it's impossible, but I don't see it right now personally. But what I can see them doing in the meantime for the Switch 2 is I can see them doing a Switch 2 patch for Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak. No, it's not the latest version of the game, but we did see precedent with the Switch first coming out where Capcom did release an enhanced version of Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, which I believe is like the final 4th generation Monster Hunter game. And that is still 30 frames as it's coming from the Nintendo 3DS up, but the resolution does look pretty decent, so it does clean up nice on the Switch One itself. What I can see them doing though, depending on how well they want to push the Switch 2 spec for Monster Hunter Rise, I can see them at least getting a Switch 2 version with up to 60 frames per second. I don't think they're going to give a higher performance for frame rate on there, but I would like to see them push the resolution between 1080p and 1440p. Now, the Switch 2 should have NVIDIA's DLSS technology and could potentially get it to a 4K DLSS upscaled resolution, though I don't think they're going to really take the time for it, just because Monster Hunter Rise on the other consoles and PC, Monster Hunter Rise on PC does have DLSS capability. I've heard it's not the best implementation, so I'm not sure I'm going to confidently say they'll try that for the Switch 2, hypothetical Switch 2 version. But I would at least like to see 1080p baseline in 60 frames. I think it'll be great. There's a lot of content in Monster Hunter Rise with the Sunbreak expansion that can hold people off for hours, especially for those that don't have a PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series console, or a high-end PC to pretty much handle all the bells and whistles that those other ports received of the version. But I think it'll be great to have that and kind of tie it over for a lot of the Nintendo only folks or handheld Monster Hunter fans that that's their primary, that's their preferred Monster Hunter experience. I think it can hold folks over for at least another year or two until the next portable Monster Hunter game is announced and revealed for the Switch 2. Now, last but certainly not least, I want to add this game. It's an indie game, and it's come out actually somewhat recently, being the past year or so, as I'm recording and uploading this video. And it's a game I really enjoyed on PC, and I think a lot more people should take notice of it, especially in the 3D platformer department. But that game is Spark the Electric Jester 3. So this got a surprise port last year. I think it was a smaller scale one by a lesser known publisher based out of the UK. I believe they're called Freakzone Games, so shout out to them. Check them out on social medias and all that good stuff. But Spark the Electric Jester 3 is a 3D platformer which takes a lot of its inspiration from the Sonic Adventure series, especially Sonic Adventure 2 on Dreamcast and everything that's come out since then. This game is awesome, y'all. It's a really fast-paced, really well-crafted 3D platformer where you can jump and only attack enemies, and you can wall run, and the physics allow you to go really, really fast, all while maintaining full control of your character Spark. Now, I'm not going to go into why I say 3 and not the first two. I mean, the first two don't exist on the Switch currently, and this is the only console version of the game. Most of LakeFeperd's games, they're mostly known on PC, so they have a following there. I follow him as well. been a fan since the Sonic fan game days in the 2010s. But I digress again. This game on the Switch, I believe it runs at 720p, both docked and in handheld. It looks crisper in handheld mode, but it is targeting 30 frames per second, which, with how fast you can go in this game and how the whole level is loaded in as you go through it, I could see why they decide to go for or at least a locked 30 frames. Now, it doesn't really stay locked at 30 frames at all times. There are times when certain levels, a lot of things can happen dynamically where it can change the theme of it. So you'll see the frame rate kind of drop a little bit, but it's not to where it's distracting or unplayable, I would say. The resolution, on the other hand, especially in docked mode, you notice when you are running through certain areas of levels, and even when you get to those sections where you have to fight enemies or even a major boss, now that resolution, it dynamically drops. Like, it is, it is probably one of the more noticeable ones I've experienced in recent times, but it does that to keep the frame rate high enough so you can keep going with the action. So I think I'm not expecting them to do a Switch 2 version, because the indie developer is pretty much, the game is pretty much made by one person. That's LakeFeperd. That's what he goes by online. But I do think when you drop in the Switch 2, it'd be great to see it, or at least personally, I would like to see it at least locked 720p resolution and a locked 30 frames per second. Both of them are dynamic, so as long as when games are in the Switch 2 in backward compatibility mode, it allows it to tap into some more power, I think it'll get there. And I think it'll be pretty easy to get there. And it'll be awesome to kind of continue on through that game, because I've played through the vast majority of it. I have not finished the last level, but I think I might wait for that and see how that goes in the Switch 2. So that's pretty much all the games that I would personally love to see get some of a performance boost on the Switch 2, whether it be backward compatibility or with a dedicated Switch 2 patch. Do you all have any games that you will be interested in either checking out for the first time or revisiting? Let me know in the comments below and we can talk about it. I read all the comments. But yes, thank you again for watching the video. Appreciate your time here. We got more on the way as we head to the Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd. Again, if you like this video, give it a like. Subscribe for more. It helps your boy out. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2025. Thank you all for watching, and peace out.